Hello and welcome to another D&D Stories. I'm your host, TheWriter, and this is the show where we sit here and I regale you with all the tabletop gaming stories and remember the time when something cool happened. So, we go once more to the Ouroboros contract, the controversial campaign that's taken us to hell, to purgatory, and every which way and back. So, we find our heroes, the fighter, the rogue, the monk, and the assassin, trying to get into the flying castle, or the castle that can fly, rather, that sits atop the cage of the flying Tarisk, which they intend to unseal to fight the Ouroboros when it wakes up. So, it is, of course, crawling with Yuan Ti, because Yuan Ti are not stupid. They know their arcane lore, and they probably know exactly what's beneath this castle. So this place has become an army encampment. Now, the castle itself is in ruin, so they basically just made like a blockade, a ring of people that are just there to occupy the territory. So we need to find a weak spot and try to get in, because if we fight everybody, then it's not going to go well for us. So 2 weeks went by, and we thought, well, what do we do? Do we start a fire somewhere and let them chase it? Do we wait until 3 in the morning and try to sneak in through the guards? What do we do? And we go, why don't we just do all of those things? And we all came up with like 5 or 6 different plans. It's like, well, if we could do all these things simultaneously, it would throw the entire place into chaos and they wouldn't know what was going on. And our assassin goes, well, I could make like a fire arrow, tie some paper or something over an arrow and hit like a keg of ale or something, the exploding barrel story, or a tent, or wherever they're keeping their kindling and start a fire. Or we could set some foliage on fire. We have, what do we call them? Snap bullets. You throw them at the ground and it starts a fire, just like a small one. They're not really weapons. They're more for, like, starting campfires, starting, like, straw fires. And like, well, we could gather up, like, dead leaves and stuff and do that. We could pick several places that their guard is the thinnest and shoot a couple of them and just run in the dead of night. And you go, well, why don't we do all of those things? So our assassin sets up with, wraps some, not vellum, but just say paper, I guess, and lights her arrow on fire, and she shoots it into a group of tents. And this has begun by now. We've got a pile of leaves. We set that on fire, so there's going to be a column of smoke. We roll one of their barrels with a flaming rag over into a group of them, and that catches fire, and the combustion sends wood in all directions. And they start yelling and screaming, and the Yuan Ti are running in all directions trying to figure out what's going on, because we basically attacked them from all sides, or at least like the greater portion of one side of this castle. And we went through the foliage out and around the perimeter while everybody started running in the direction they thought the attack was coming from. And of course they're not stupid. They left a small group, so we had to run out into the open. Again, this is like 3 in the morning, so not everybody's even awake yet. So we got some major bonuses, and our assassin just starts picking them off as we run in. Like, I think she had like shot on the run, or whatever it is, where you can attack, move, attack, or something like that. And we stop and we just like pepper them as they're coming out of their tents. They have no chance. The guys that are up on like their erected wooden lookout towers, we, send arrows up there. We've got, our monk is climbing up these things and just like throwing guys off so they don't hit the gong and alert everybody that there's another attack going on. We kind of have to blitzkrieg our way into this castle, and we're like pulling arrows out of the guys we shot and stuffing them back in the tents so it doesn't look like anything happened, to the best that we can. And it's pandemonium among the Yuan Ti because we attacked from multiple sides, even though there's only 4 of us. So they're trying to find us in the foliage. They're running after burning leaves. There's a column of smoke coming from one side. Tents are on fire. Piles of straw that they were sleeping on is on fire. And we book it for the the nearest window or the nearest castle gate area. Because again, this castle was meant to fly, so if we can get in and shut the door, it might be ruinous, but it's still stone, so it would protect us well enough. And we kind of shoulder check the doors open, and we close them again. We throw the bar over it. We're like, okay, I think we're in now. And we stand there and we listen for a while, and the Yuan-ti are running back and forth in chaos. So long as they're confused about what's going on, we've got time to move through the castle. And we studied, we pull out the book again, the rituals that sealed the Tarisk the last time. And our assassin goes, well, according to this, there are 3 bolts holding the castle down, like big, like the head is the size of your head bolts, to keep it from just like floating away or just like somebody's coming along and stealing it. So there's 3 seals on them: a physical seal, a magical seal, and a spiritual seal. We go, okay, well, we've got our helpless NPC. I think we called him like Cornelius. He was an elderly dwarven wizard or something. And again, he didn't have fireball or anything. He just knew like arcane stuff to help us out. It's like, well, we've got a fighter who's strong, we've got a wizard who's magical, and we've got a monk who's spiritual. So we can probably pull this off. And so we weave our way through the castle. There's a lot of like gargoyle work, a lot of runes just all over the walls, every which way. This was clearly not meant to be lived in. It was more like just like a flying fortress. There's plenty of places for people to sleep. The kitchen and the pantry area is massive, though it's completely ruinous. I mean, anything even made of wood has long since turned to dust and collapsed. And, the main entryway and stuff like that is just covered with fancy statuary. We don't want to stand in front of them because, like, the dragon statues could come to life and attack us, or the gargoyles could jump down from the buttresses and, just the weight alone would kill us and stuff like that. And they clearly sealed this place up because as we're walking along, our fighter falls into a pit trap. It's like a circular, just like it opens in all directions, and he falls straight down, and he grabs the ledge. We have to pull him back up. And then there's, swinging blade traps, and there's acid spray traps. Anytime we open a door, this place was not meant to go anywhere ever again. And sure enough, as we're going up one of the upper banisters to get to the second floor, one of the dragon statues decides to crawl down and attack us. And I go, a dragon statue, it's made of stone. And he goes, yeah. The assassin's like, I shoot it with my longbow. It's like, plink, and it goes off because it's made of stone. I was like, oh, I go and I hit it with my battle axe. Boom, and his battle axe just blasts apart. And we're like, oh, crap. So it chases us up the banister. We hop down again. We ride the rails all the way back down. It's got to chase us down the stairs. It's like nothing we're really doing is helping out. And we're... like, the fighter's like, I take a big, like, a loose floor stone and just, like, crash it against its sides. Like, well, that's an improvised weapon, but, it does X amount of damage according to your strength. And it chips this thing. We're not getting anywhere with this stone dragon. Its eyes light up red, and it shoots you with its laser eyes. And there's like, laser eyes, really? Well, fine, fire eyes, whatever you want to call it. It's omega beams, whatever. And we get a face full of dragon fire eyes, and we're like, what if they're just like fire rubies, like a trap on a golem? And the assassin's like, I've got a crowbar. I run up and like tumble up onto the thing, and he's like, make your tumble check, and she makes it, of course. It's like, I crawl up its long neck, and I use the crowbar, and I pry its ruby eyes out, just plink, plink. And it's like, the fire rubies go tumbling down, and you have blinded this stone dragon. As soon as the rubies strike the ground, they explode like grenades, doing catastrophic damage to its front. And the fighter's like, yes, I take out my club and I try to just like break it apart because it's covered with cracks now. And the fighter runs up to it, boom, and just shards of stone go everywhere. Boom! More shards of stone go in all directions, and finally it just like shudders and shakes apart. And we're like, oh, God, okay. It's like, come on, Cornelius, we're not there yet. And we keep going up the stairs and just like trying to find, like, if you had a castle that flied, where would you put the cockpit? And I was like, a balcony somewhere? No, it has to be inside so you can keep the pilot safe. And I was like, the lowest dungeon? No, that's where you keep all the bad guys. And it's like, well, maybe there's like a throne room or something similar where the main group of people hung out, or like a circular, like a round table area where they all hung out. And of course, it's basically a dungeon. We can't make heads or tails of the way this castle is laid out because it's not symmetrical. It's a real kind of building. And we run into other things like stone gargoyles. We run into another stone dragon. There's chandeliers that are shooting like ancient candles at us. So we have to cut the chain and hack them apart with our weapons, and our blunt weapons became very valuable. We had one mace among the four of us. I think our fighter had like a mace or a club, and I had a wooden club, so that doesn't help against like stone guardians. But there were a lot of golems running around, a lot of animated objects. It's like, don't trust the torches, don't trust the chandeliers. Check the doors before you open them. Everything was booby-trapped because they did not want this castle moving. But before long, we make it up to like the third story of this castle. It's pretty darn big, and there's like a tower that winds upward and upward as like a crow's nest, I'm guessing. But we get up to the third story, and we finally come across like this grand hall that's got columns and nice marble and just dust everywhere because nobody's been there in 1,000 years or what have you. I was like, why didn't the Yuan Ti come in here? We can't really tell. So, and of course, sitting on a pedestal covered with dust and everything else is a crystal ball. And we're like, all right, Cornelius, go do your thing. And you're like, no, you have to go undo the seals first and take the bolts out. Otherwise, we're just going to struggle against the weight of whatever's holding the castle down. We're like, shit. Well, at least we know where the cockpit is now. We know where the crystal is. And so we weave our way around the castle. It's like, okay, how do you bolt something down? Well, you got to go, and we look at each other and we're like, where, it's a castle. It's not usually supposed to move. How would you bolt something down this big? And I go, well, when I was a small boy, my dad had a safe. And it was one of those, like, pick it up and carry it kind of safes, but he didn't want people to just make off with it and figure out the combination at their leisure. So he got a safe that had like holes in the bottom, and you could drill it into the floor and attach it to the floor so people couldn't just grab it and run off with it. So I'm guessing if we go to like the lowest dungeon of the lowest blah-de-blah, we might find the bolts there. And he's like, yeah, you're right. It's like if there's like a dungeon or a root cellar, a wine cellar, like a larder, I guess, whatever you would want to have down there, secret basement maybe, that's probably where we would find all three of these bolts that are holding it in. And of course, we go down there, and again, we've got stairs that flatten themselves so that we slide down them, and across from them is a wall of spikes, and we got to stop ourselves and do the splits against the wall and the banister. We've got sticky stairs that are actually like mimics pretending to be staircases. We had more stone guardians. This place was packed with bullshit that wanted to stop us, but we had to weave and fight and hack our way through all of it to get down into the basement area, the dungeons, the different the spring-loaded doors that wanted to just whack us against the wall and then reset themselves. I think we actually ran into an old-fashioned like cannon behind the door, which is impossible, but it was a trap where we opened the door and there was like a chain or a pull string or something, and on the other end of this hallway was a cannon, like an old-fashioned clay cannon, that would just like shoot like 5-inch in diameter cannonballs at us whenever we opened this door, and then magically reset itself. So we had to open the door just a little bit and like cut the chain or cut the doorknob or whatever it was attached to so we wouldn't get our heads blown off. So we went down. I was like, how much of this castle is actually going to go with us? Like, it's going to take a good portion of the earth with it when we actually do this. But we get down there to the lowest dungeon. It's like one of the random dungeon cells has a stone that's not inlaid with the ground with the rest of the stuff. And we move it, and sure enough, it's a big like hexagonal, just a good old-fashioned bolt, except it was like big enough around for like a dinner plate. And we're like, how are we going to move this? I don't have a wrench this big. And we tie chains around it. We're trying to move it, and it's like, well, how exactly are we going to do this? Cornelius, you got anything? And Cornelius comes around, and he looks at the scratch marks on the dungeon wall, and he looks at the bolt, and he looks at the ceiling, and he's like doing his knowledge arcane check. And he reaches over, and he pushes one of the bricks, and the bolt comes up like on a pedestal almost. And it's like, okay, we can see the sides, and the sides of the bolt have holes in them. And we're like, hey, we've got torches and never ever still rods and stuff. We can just like stick stuff in there and like walk in a little circle and undo the bolt that way. So the four of us, we got like a torch, an ever still rod. I think our monk used like her bow staff, and we pushed them around like almost like a windmill or I guess a windmill, like the inner mechanism of a windmill when you were grinding grain. We walk in a little circle to undo this bolt, and we pull it up and, oh God, it's heavy, and slam it on the ground. I'm like, oh, well, that's one. Good job, Cornelius. He's like, no problem. Let's get the other two and get out of here before the Wantee realize what's going on. And we tool around in the lower levels for a while. It's like, well, they're not all in jail cells. Where else would they be? Like, well, there could be a root cellar or again, another pantry or a larder way down here, like in case of siege. Here's where we keep all the extra food. And sure enough, we find a great big room that's got crates in the corner, busted barrels, and just like filth all over the place. And we find another raised stone in the floor. And we pick it up and we move it, and sure enough, there's another one of these bolts. And he's like, well, how do we move this one? Is this magical? Is this spiritual? And our monk like runs her hands across it, and Cornelius runs his hands across it, and we're trying to figure out, like, we moved the physical one. How does this one work? And the monk goes, this one feels unusually still for metal. And our DM goes, make your will save, make your fortitude save to see if you can figure out what you can do about this, monk. Spiritual magic is different from any other. So it would take, the hands of a monk to move such a thing. And he goes, do I do knowledge arcana? Do I just like pull on it? What do you want? And he goes, well, you've got key, don't you? And he goes, yes, everyone has key. Well, you've got, key punch. You've got, stunning fist. Anything that uses key, you could probably move it. And he's like, all right, I'd punch it, I guess. And she punches this bolt, and it's almost like a push button when you're turning on like a stereo. It's like it clicks down and it comes back up. It's like, well, you punch it straight down, and it goes down like 6 inches, and then it springs out of the ground like it weighs nothing, and it falls to one side. And your flurry of blows per day are used up. It used a lot of your ki. Which I know that's not actually in the rules, but that's like the price we paid to move it all in one go. And, by then we're coming up into the teens of levels, so flurry of blows being used up isn't as bad as you might think for a monk. He's just like, yeah, that's 2 out of 3. And Cornelius is like, good job. And he turns it over and over a couple of times to make sure this is what we were looking for. Like, there are no fake ones anywhere. He's like, well, the third one is magical. We can leave that to Cornelius, right? He goes, yeah. So we wander around some more. More doors with bullshit on them. More poison needles, dart traps. Just like, Rob must have had a great time designing this castle and filling it with bullshit at every corner, because we fell for a bunch of it and we burned a lot of potions breaking through these stone creatures, breaking through just all the traps and things. And it's like, I'm the rogue, but I'm missing a hand, and stuff like that. So disabling traps is no longer my forte when I take like a -4 or a -6 to everything. I ended up springing a lot of traps on myself even when I found them. So our assassin had to come and help me out most of the time. It's like, I need a second opinion. I rolled a -4. Stuff like that. So we blunder our way along and find I think the third one was in a weird spot. It was like in a broom closet or something. You just wouldn't look for it there. But again, a stone that's raised out of the ground to cover this third like massive bolt that you couldn't put a dinner plate over. And we go, okay, Cornelius, what do you think? It's like, well, I could blow it up or strike it with lightning or anything. We would need to sit here and wait. I could use the open spell on it, or the knock spell, rather, and that, if it counts as, like, opening a door or something, magically speaking, then it might work. It's like, how do we do this? It's like, well, we have fought a lot of stuff, and if the Wanti haven't come after us by now, then surely we're safe to sit and rest. So we make camp for the night. We eat rations, we unroll our bedrolls, we go back to like the prison zone area, or the dungeon rather, below the castle, so everybody can have their own room for their own private time if they want. We can use our water skins to like scrub some of the blood off of our faces, and we dress each other's wounds and all that good stuff. And we make camp for the night, and we stay there. And of course, we leave our assassin, and then me, and then our fighter up to keep watch, because there is nothing more foolish than a D&D party where everybody goes to sleep at the same time. So we keep watch, but thankfully nothing happens. And we go back the next day, and it's like Cornelius has like his spell book, and he's flipping through it because it takes X amount of time to prepare spells. He's like, okay, I could destroy it, mage hand it. It's probably not less than 10 pounds. And he thinks of all these different things that we could do. And like, okay, we're going to try each one of those things. I'm guessing it's, these giant bolts are not just made of iron. So what do you think, Cornelius? And he goes, well, I could just shrink it and take it out. And he goes, and we go, really? He goes, yeah, it's like reduce person, except it's like reduce object. Or reduce in stature or whatever. I forgot what the spell's called. He can shrink a singular object, whether it's mundane or magical, for X amount of time. It's like, I could shrink the bolt, you could take it out, and then sit it to one side, and then when the spell wears off, it'll just go back to its normal size. And we go, yeah, do that. That actually makes things a lot simpler. And he's like, Hobidaj, Mistravai! And he shrinks the bolt down to like maybe a third of its size. And the fighter reaches down and is like, oh, it's still heavy, God. And I said I'd be shrinking it, not changing its weight. That's not how physics works. And we're like, oh, yeah. Doesn't matter if you shrink something, it doesn't change in weight. You're just like pushing the atoms together. Magic and science together as one. So the fighter struggles with it, and we have to help him move this bolt that only comes up to his knee now. And we set it to one side, and then the spell wears off, and it goes back to its regular size. And it's like, okay, that's all three. We can go back to the crystal ball room and I guess take off. And then we look at each other and we go, where are we going to take this castle? It's like, we need to move it, yes, to get it off the plate that holds the terraced body, but where are we going to take it? It's like, we're not exactly inconspicuous. It's like, it doesn't have a stealth mode. We're not going to turn invisible like Wonder Woman's jet. Where are we going to take this thing? And we go, well, and there's this 20-minute, like, argument. And I was like, we kind of, like, set our 5-minute break time for there so we could, like, go to the bathroom, go get a smoke, like, argue amongst ourselves. And like a half an hour goes by, we're just sitting there trying to figure out, like, where do we can't exactly, like, take off. And then the Wanti are going to follow us. I don't think this castle can go, like, 80 miles an hour. I don't think that's how it's going to work. But where do we go? What do we do with it? Should we set it in the ocean? Can we do it? Can we get that far without the Yuan-ti getting up into it again? I mean, fly is not an uncommon spell among wizards. They could probably just come and try to take it over from us. It's like, well, what's the nearest landmark? And we look, it's the fort at the base of the volcano. And we look at each other, and we look at Rob, and Rob goes, what? We're going to take this flying castle and drop it on the fort at the base of the volcano. And he goes, what? And he goes, yep, that's exactly what I'm doing. Cornelius, let's go. And Cornelius, we're up in the in the orb room. And Cornelius takes the sides of the crystal ball and his eyes roll into his head, and we have to like close his eyes so they don't dry out. He's like, all right, we're taking off. Hold on. And it's like, and the castle starts to shake, and dust falls from the ceiling, and all the guardians in every room, the ones that are left, like revert back to their stone state, and all the traps reset themselves as this place like turns on from this focal point. Cornelius is like, we're taking off. We're going into the air. And, outside, the Yuan-ti are freaking out because they think it's an earthquake, but the castle is leaving. So, like, the earth is splitting open and the stones are rushing back to be part of the greater whole, even the ruinous parts. And, there are hidden runes glowing all over the place, and all the doors and windows slam shut, and like, bars rush over everything so nobody can, like, leap out a window and die. And the courtyard, starts to glow white as all this impossible magic lifts a castle into the fucking sky. And we're like, oh my God, I gotta go see. We run to the nearest window, to the nearest balconies, to like look down as the ground just floats. We float away, and we see all the Yuan-ti, and we like point down at them. It's like, assassin, should we shoot down at them while we're leaving? Like, nope. We don't need them to know that there's anybody in here. We're just going to take the castle and go. For all they know, the castle got possessed and decided to wander off. It's like, well, if they knew what this place was, they know somebody's driving it. It's like, yeah, but they can't follow us, at least not for a while. Not until they find a wizard that's got the fly spell or a magic carpet or some other bullshit that Rob can come up with. So we've got at least a day before... before they can actually try and catch up with us or try and lay siege to this place. And we're like, Cornelius, how long can you do this? And he goes, long enough. And he's got his hands on the orb. It's like, as long as I've got my hands on this orb, we'll stay in flight. So we fly the castle, and as the crow flies, it's not a 3 to 7 day journey. All the way back to the fort at the base of the volcano, and to see the look on their faces as another castle flies towards their fort, and you can see, like, we saw, like, all the tiny Yuan-ti, like ants running around. It's like they're banging on their gongs. They've got a catapult set up, and they try and launch a catapult stone, but it doesn't fly high enough. It's like a couple of Yuan-ti wizards like shoot fireballs up at us, but it's a castle. What can you possibly do? And we kind of like crowd around Cornelius so we can kind of see where we're going in the crystal ball. It's like, all right, how are we going to do this? We're just going to drop it. This room is probably going to come apart. And it's like, well, our assassin has lots of ranks in tumble. I've got lots of ranks in tumble. We can just grab Cornelius and just like jump for the tree line and like catch ourselves. And he's like, okay, here we go. And so Cornelius angles the entire castle at this fort. And it's like, you miserable lizardy sacks of crap, here we come. Ah! And we grab Cornelius around the waist, and we've got like our grappling hooks. And we're like, okay, we'll wait until the last second to kind of minimize our fall. And we throw for the nearest branches, and we leap out as the castle crashes into the fucking fort like a comet made of hellfire and stone. And just boom! This castle explodes straight into this fort. The Yuan-ti all get crushed. There's avalanches of stone going in all directions, buildings are collapsing and crushing onto themselves. The outer walls fall apart. They blast apart like a freaking comet hit the ground, castle-shaped. And all the runes split open. All the Yuan Ti banners get tossed to the wind. And it's like, if there are any survivors, they're probably either unconscious or buried in the rock and stone. And it's like, we dropped one castle on top of another. Yes! High five! And so we are hanging by our ropes, and thank God we all rolled high, because leaping from a flying castle is never a good idea, but what else could we do? And we are dangling by our ropes in the tree line, and we go and we hide and we watch. We watch for a long time just to see if like there are any survivors, anybody. It's like, well, what about all the servants and the comfort women and, anybody who was innocent in there? It's like, well, I guess we didn't really think of that. Oh, well, we're saving the world. Sacrifices have to be made, even though that we didn't have to take the castle here. And we kind of look at each other like we probably killed like 50 innocent people just now. But we killed 300 Yuan Ti, and we buried the portal to purgatory as well. And it was like, oh, well, geez. I forgot about that. At least the purgatory babies have not overrun the mortal plane because we left the portal open to purgatory. Jesus Christ. So there are loose ends, but we buried most of them. So we're feeling pretty good at this point. Like, 50 innocent people, 300 bad guys, roundabouts. Plus, Lizard Man McCaptain Face, who didn't want to deal with us and tried to have us be raped and tortured and hanged. At least we squished him. The Yuan Ti in this area are no more because we crushed them with a castle. So we're feeling pretty good about ourselves. It's like, okay, so we have unearthed the big iron plate. And I was like, we could have just like flown the castle up and then dropped it on the plate to break it, because we needed to move the plate anyway. And we're like, shut up. That was more satisfying. We'll figure out another way to move the plate. Or better yet, we can just get the terrorist's soul and try to shove the soul back in, and he'll break out on his own. It's not like any physical barrier is going to stop him once he's awake. And like, yeah, you're right. So we're climbing out of the trees. We make camp for the night. We watch the place to see if there are any campfires that pop up, if there's any survivors. No. Nobody came out of that. So it was just a massive, again, just like a comet hit the ground and blew the fort right the fuck up. So we're like, all right, we should make our way back to the dwarven cities in the mountains. And so, 2-3 days go by of constant just like travel. We don't have horses or anything, but we make our way. And there aren't any Yuan Ti in this area to track us, to look for us, because as soon as they see that giant ruin, that was a catastrophic loss for them in terms of like holding this area. They don't have a fortress anymore. Never mind the 300 people. They don't have a stronghold within the nearest 60 miles. So their grip on this area in particular is loosening. So we are the least of their worries. But we trek our way back up into the mountains, and we find the secret door. We do the secret knock. The dwarves let us in. They look us over. We get X number of healing potions. Good job, Cornelius. Yeah, you're a hero to the people. And I'll slap him on his back. He gets a medal, because of course he does, for driving this castle across the sky and dropping it on the Yuan Ti. You're a great addition to the war effort. Great job, Cornelius. And Cornelius is like halfway traumatized because he killed a lot of people driving this thing across the sky. And just, so he's kind of like war traumatized, but he served his purpose, poor guy. So we have to send him to like counseling and a therapist and a nurse and stuff like that. But we're back in safety, and we're like, okay, thank God. We all invest in maces. Because we got caught way the hell off guard trying to fight stone guardians with metal-edged weaponry. It did not go well. So we all go and we buy like +1 light maces that can also give off light like a torch, if need be. And they're like, okay, is everybody carrying a piercing weapon, a bludgeoning weapon, and a slashing weapon? And we check each other and we're like, yes, okay, so damage reduction won't hurt us anymore. It's like, if we got Alchemist Fire, yes. Do we have instant cold potions? Yes, okay. We're not going to be caught off guard like that by freaking damage reduction or damage resistance. So Rob can throw something more exotic at us if we can respond to it with several different types of damage. We don't have holy damage anymore, but, we can compensate for some parts of the elemental wheel with magic items. So we look at each other and are like, okay, what else can we do? We have to go get all of our wounds seen to, and we do our shopping. And we need to go check on Amanda again. That's what it was. And we go, okay, last we saw her, she was pregnant with half-demon baby. So, in the time that we were gone, she might have given birth. And we go, okay. We go and check on Amanda, just kind of like hesitantly. And we go to like the hospital, I guess, area that she's being kept. And the Dwarven City is underground in this mountain, so there's plenty of cavernous space. And we go, nurse, how is Amanda doing? And the nurse is running back and forth taking care of different people, but she does stop to tell us that Amanda gave birth while we were gone. And we go, was it a half-demon baby? And she goes, we don't know. And you go, you don't know? She's there in that room, isn't she? And she goes, yes, Amanda's there. The baby's not. And we go, what? Why? And we kind of push the door in. And Amanda's sitting there looking much more, what's the word? Not vivid. Lucid, yeah. She's looking much more lucid than normal, like lucid dreaming, where you know what's going on. She's looking more lucid than normal, and there's like blood stains across the bed. And we look down at the floor, and there are little footprints. And as they cross the room, they get bigger. And we go, oh crap. And as they reach the door frame, like we're looking at a trail of footprints. They're not appearing in front of us. We look at this trail of footprints, and they're like red and bloody, like from being born, I guess. And they get bigger and bigger until they reach the threshold, and then they stop. And we're like, oh shit, there's a half-demon, well, apparently not a baby anymore. There's a half-demon something or another running around. And we go, what do we even do? It could be anywhere. It could be anyone. If it can change size right after it's being born, it could look like anybody. It could be like a doppelganger. We go, Amanda, are you okay? And she looks about as good as any woman who's given birth. She's puffy and in pain and just kind of trying to stay awake. She's like, my baby, I gave birth. My baby ran off. And we go, can you tell us anything, Amanda? Because, this is the product of this long string of stuff that was completely fucked up. But this baby was born, and then it ran off. So you need to tell us what happened. And she goes, I gave birth, and, it pulled the umbilical cord, and then it got up and it walked away. And as it was leaving, it grew to the size of a regular woman. And I go, oh, well, it's a girl. Congratulations? ? And go, can you tell us anything about it? Was it red-skinned? Did it have wings? Did it have hair? And she gives us a vague description, just that it grew to adult size. It had pinkish skin, yellow eyes, didn't have wings or anything like that, but it did have a tail. And I go, where did she go? She left this hospital room, obviously, but nobody saw a pink-skinned, naked woman with a tail and yellow eyes running around. And we go, she could be anywhere. I mean, she had blood on her feet. She was dripping with blood. And we run out into the hallway. We look for the blood trail, and it leads all the way out of the hospital and then like out into like the dwarven streets, and then it stops. Like it either she stopped dripping, she stopped just no, she's gone. And I'm like, oh shit. What do we even do? We go back to Amanda. What do we even do? She's like, what, 12 hours old, and she's already an adult. She's half demon. She's naked somewhere. And poor Amanda. My God. This woman went to hell, gave birth to a demon baby, and it ran off. It's like I can't even imagine how traumatizing this is. And apparently it came out smart as a whip because it ran off to do whatever it wants to do. It's like, is it running to open a portal to hell and run home to daddy? Is it just like a feral animal and it's just going to eat people until it gets stronger? This is like a horror movie scenario. It's like, do we tell the Dwarven Council about this? Do we panic the entire damn city that a half-demon woman is running around and God knows what she's going to do? And he goes, well, we can't search the entire mountain range. There are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of caverns and corridors and houses and storage areas and you know, the Dwarven civilization hollowed out this mountain range. We're never going to find her. She doesn't leave a trail, like beyond like the blood that led out into the street. And apparently nobody saw her. After a while, she might be able to turn invisible. So the rules do not apply to this woman, whoever she is. Like, did you name her? No. Great. Wonderful. And oh, by the way, we still need to figure out how to break into heaven. So our problems are now twofold. And we just kind of sit there and we palm our faces and we rest our heads like on our elbows. It's like we have no answer for this. Half demon woman baby aside, we look at each other and we very suddenly realize that the soul of the Tarisk is still in heaven. And, you know, forget going to hell. There's no way that we're going to be able to get into heaven to steal something. And, you know, Rob looks over at our fighter. Let's just call him Simon. And he goes, Simon, you know a lot about, like, the Judeo-Christian version of heaven. Why don't you tell us about, like, the gates and stuff? It's like Rob was brave enough to make up his own hell, but he dare not mess with the lore of heaven. I don't know where his priorities lay, but much like hell, I think it's Forgotten Realms, has maps of heaven also. You know, or if you've read Dante's Inferno, the circles of heaven are like a mountain, and at the top is God. So it's not that we don't have a layout, it's just that heaven is an infinite plane where everybody can have their own universe. And we look at each other and we go, Simon, can you tell us anything about what we're about to try to do? And Simon looks at us, and Simon is not really a devout Christian, but he's like, almost like a Christian scholar. He knows a lot about like what angels actually look like according to the Bible, what the procedures are to get in and out of heaven and God's grace and the historical events and things like that. And he goes, okay, you know, Simon says, okay, let's just say that we're doing the Sunday school version of heaven, because we're not. We're probably breaking into like Pelor's heaven or Bacab's heaven or something like that, but just pretend it's the Judeo-Christian God and we're trying to break into heaven. You know who guards the gates of heaven? St. Peter. And for those of you that don't know your Christian lore, St. Peter was a man whose faith was so strong that God and Jesus Christ himself gave him the keys to heaven. Like, he stands in front of the gate. Heaven is a gated community. Like, you can go to hell, they'll invite you in and then apparently rape you for 5 days. And purgatory doesn't really care. Heaven has gates. And only one guy's got the keys to heaven. And St. Peter, he stands in front of the gates of heaven. And I'm butchering this story because this was like 6 years ago. But he stands in front of the gates of heaven. And in some versions of the story, he's got the book of life. and you tell him your name, like when you die, you tell him your name, and if your name is in the book of life, he turns around with the keys to heaven, and he opens the gate, and he lets you in, and then he shuts it behind you, and you go on to heaven. But if you go up to St. Peter, and you tell him your name, and your name isn't in the book of life, he sends you to hell. Like, no questions asked. He casts you out into hell. Like, he's the guy that decides, like, aside from, like, all your deeds and stuff, he's the fact checker. He's the guy with the keys to the gates of heaven. And just put that in a D&D setting, you know, he might be portrayed as like an archangel or some other holy thing. And Simon goes on a long tirade about angels, because there are no angels like right outside the gates of heaven. St. Peter was enough, apparently. So whatever representation of St. Peter that D&D has will be more than enough to repel us from the gates of heaven. And we go, can you tell us anything else? And he goes, well, if you read the physical descriptions of angels, like in the Bible, like especially in the Old Testament, they're terrifying. It's like demons are scary, angels are worse. There's a reason when angels, like anytime an angel appears before someone in the Bible, the first words out of their mouth is, be not afraid. It's because they're freaking terrifying. And if you go into like their physical descriptions, like some of them are like 2 rings of light covered with eyes and filled with fire. Some of them are lions with 3 faces wrapped in a shroud of wings. Some of them are the size of the damn Chrysler building, and if they look at you wrong, you burst into ash. There's no... We're not getting into heaven. There's no way. Even if we have some weird ritual like we did to go to hell and bargain with demons, do you really think the gods have left this world? Do you really think we're going to be able to break into heaven at all? Like, just say, even if it's not St. Peter, whoever's guarding the gates of heaven will be more than enough to repel our stupid asses. And it's like, what do we do? What do we do? We have nothing. And even if one of us like died or one of us killed the other, like we sacrificed ourselves to send one of us to heaven to tell them, hey, send the Terras soul back so we can save the world, none of us are qualified to go to heaven. And we look at each other like, yeah, we have lied, cheated, stolen, committed acts of lust, envy, gluttony, greed. We've kind of hit all the big ones. And in terms of like Judeo-Christian getting into heaven, this was one thing that Rob did not make up his own lore for, because again, to some people, heaven is an idea, not a place. But D&D, again, it's like hell. There's maps of it. You can go there. The only problem is whoever's guarding the gates, whether it be St. Peter or whoever, is not going to let us in. And on top of that, even if we somehow got into heaven, where would we look? You know, there's heaven is not a city. It's an infinite number of universes where people can do whatever they want because it's heaven, and that's how it works. And we try like knowledge religion. We try, you know, is there a way to barter with angels? Is there any way to summon, you know, the gaze of a god onto you? And we look through all this stuff and we go, it's all holy magic. And we have no holy magic. The paladins are powerless. How exactly are we going to get to fucking heaven? And we go, well, and we confer about this for a long time. And then that game ended there. But we confer about this for weeks. Rob is trying to get us to come up with our own reason. So like 3 weeks go by, and we argue and we debate, and it's like these really long, like philosophical conversations happen about trying to like cheat your way into heaven or break into heaven, and we've got nothing for the longest time. It's like, well, how do you, suppose we were 2 countries at war, how would we send a message to the inside without getting killed? Well, you send a messenger, right? Can we send a messenger to heaven? No. Well, what if we find somebody who's like devout, who's about to die and go to heaven, and we could put like a message with them? How do we even... And we think about this for a while. I go, well, the people that were in purgatory had all the stuff that they had on them when they died, and the people in hell, you know, they got torn apart and tortured and stuff, but they had all the stuff that was on them when they died. So what if we wrote out a message and we gave it to somebody who was about to die and go to heaven, and they could deliver that message to someone, I don't know, St. Peter, an angel, God, whichever God it might be in the D&D universe. And we look at each other and we go, that's about as thin as parchment, but that's the best we got. So we write a letter, and I'm not kidding, we write a letter to heaven because we know we're not going to go there ourselves. And we start searching the city. And we go to like old folks' homes, we go to children's hospitals, we go to all these places, like where to, like people that are dying or about to die that have led good lives. And it's hard to find somebody who's good enough for heaven just based on like asking them questions or asking their families about how they are. I was like, the gods are gone, but maybe there's like a cathedral to Moradin somewhere. We could ask like a really elderly nun or something. And Rob, our DM, goes, well, let me roll on that. And it's like a 3% chance. And he rolls a 2. He's like, well, you happen to be in luck because one of the nuns or priestesses or whatever you want to call it is on her way out. And they are holding like her last rites, she's on her deathbed right now. And it's like, we've got to send in like just one of us. Is like, this is gonna help us save the world. So like we get our monk and we put her in like a nice dress, and she puts on makeup and does her hair, and she does all these things to try and make herself look a little less, murder hobo. She takes a bath, she does all the good things. She like touches her neck with incense and all the or perfume, whatever. And she goes in there, and they're like, Sister, Helga Stormhammer or whatever is on her way to heaven to see Moradin, to see all of her ancestors. And, I came to pay my respects and make a request. And she passes the letter to heaven off to this dying priestess who's just an old dwarf. She's on her way out. She's lived, a holy life. She's clearly pretty much on her way to heaven. And we go, please, when you get there, please hand this to somebody. Let them know that the world stands on the brink and that, we dare not break into heaven, but we do beg for its help. And, she's on her deathbed. She can barely see us. She can barely hear us, but she agrees. And she takes the scroll into her hands, and she holds it with both hands and just dies right there in front of us. So we were just in time. And as soon as, Helga Stormhammer or Thunderhammer, we gave her a really silly dwarven name, but it was on the fly. Helga Stormhammer dies, and just as she dies, a birdcage appears on the bedside table next to her. And inside this birdcage is a sphere of light. And our monk looks over and goes, is that what I think it is? And as she looks at it, it kind of beats against the golden bars of the cage, just like we don't even know what it's. Ugh. But it can't work the sides of the cage, and it can't break out. And I go, is that what I think it is? And yeah, sure enough, Rob says that this dying nun went to heaven, delivered our message, and heaven sent the soul of the Tarisk back to us in physical form in this birdcage. And our monk picks it up really delicately. If we drop this and the cage breaks, we are screwed. And it's like, we've got it. We've got the Tarisk soul. And, and thank God we didn't have to try to break into heaven, because Lord knows an angel would look at us wrong and we'd burst into ash. So we pay our respects. We donate to this nun's funeral and to the cathedral she was in, and we book it. We book it back to the Iron Plate. All the way back out there, the Yuan-ti are scattered. And we're like, okay, there's got to be an entrance or a hatch or something. And sure enough, we find one sealed with runes and sealed with God knows what else. And we bust it open with our crowbars and our thieves' tools and everything. And the exploding runes go off, and we have to deal with that. We feel like we're in the home stretch at this point. And we fling the hatch open, and we look down into absolute darkness. It's like, if it's like kaiju-sized, there's no telling how deep this might be. Like, we can't just jump down there. And it's like, I light a torch and I drop it just to see how deep it goes. And we watch the torch go and go and go and go until it disappears into darkness. It's like, well, here's the best we can do. We take out the bird cage and we just like throw it down there. And we watch it go and we hear it like tumble against the rock. And we hear it like break into pieces and echo every which way. It's like, we better get off this plate now that I think about it. So we run for it because we know as soon as we put the soul back into this Tarisk, it's gonna be go time. Like, it's gonna wake up, it's gonna bust free, and anything that gets in its way, it's gonna suck to be us if we're anywhere near it. So like, okay, we're gonna run for it now. And just as we're like setting foot off the edge of the Iron Plate, the ground starts to shake. And cracks start forming in the world, and we look around and we go, oh no. And, one earthquake happens, and then another earthquake happens, and then another earthquake happens. And we look around and we're like, oh God, were we just in time? And it's like, we've got to run. We've got to run. We get on our horses and we ride hard, just like in a straight line away from this. Like up into the hills, up away from all this. And we get up to the crest of these hills and we turn around just in time. We think we see like its body coming up out. No, that was the tip of its nose. And a Tarisk, a winged Tarisk of all things, emerges from the ground and roars, and its steps shake the earth. And if you haven't seen a Tarisk, just like Google that shit and see what a giant like three-horned like dinosaur Godzilla kaiju thing that this is. Just emerges out of the ground. It dwarfs the trees. It dwarfs the castle that used to be there. The plate is breaking open in all directions, so we see the size of the cage that they made for this thing, and it emerges up out of the ground. And we're like, well, this is it. Whenever the Ouroboros gets here, this is going to be it. And our Rob looks at us and goes, it's a good thing you set the Tarisk free just now, because the Ouroboros is about to break free as well. And we go, oh yeah, this is happening. This is how this goes down. It's like, well, it's the end of the world. Let's sit down with like a picnic and watch it happen, because there's no distance for us to run. There's nowhere to hide. We couldn't go back to the mountains and hide from this, because Lord knows they're as big as mountains. So whichever way the fight goes, we're not going to get away from this. We may as well have ringside seats. So, fighter, rogue, assassin, and monk sit down cross-legged, and we pass out our rations, and we, uncork the wine as, like, right on the horizon, the Ouroboros begins to emerge. And the Ouroboros, like we said, is the snake god of the Yuan-ti. It's a giant, just world-sized cobra. It splits the fucking tectonic plates of this planet open, and we can see lava spurting miles high in all directions. And they, the Tarisk, the winged Tarisk, and the Ouroboros see each other, and immediately it's a turf war, and they charge straight into each other. The power of a god and the power of a world-ending dragon turtle monster crash into each other, and Rob goes, and then the world ends. And we're like, God damn it, Rob. He's like, what? You unleashed not one but two world eaters onto each other. the world is their bitch now. So I will have to come back for another episode to tell you the aftermath, but that is where like our part in that campaign ended. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you guys on the next D&D Stories. Keep gaming. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like button for me. If you want to keep up with channel updates, check me out on Facebook. And if you're feeling especially generous, be sure to visit my Patreon. Keep gaming!